Begin with the session, I would like to introduce our speaker, Dr. Cheryl Sellis. Ma'am is a registered dietitian and also the founder of Nurture Health Solutions. She has an experience of over 22 years in the field of dietetics and diabetes education. She has also been a recipient of various awards, which includes Sadhana Award 2022 for excellence in the field of nutrition and dietetics. She is also an author of the award winning book Diet and Diabetes Simplified. We welcome you, ma'am. Now, I would like to request Dr. Cheryl Sellis to come on the dais.
Good evening, everyone. It's really an honor and pleasure being with all of you, and it's my first visit to this beautiful campus, and I just fell in love with it. It's so, so good. And thank you so much, Dr. Kavita, Dr. Rajiv, and the entire organizing team for inviting me. And I'm going to take you through this presentation, and I can see all women, and Dr. Kavita has asked me to focus on women, and I think it's so important because I truly believe, not because I'm a woman, but I also believe that we are the future of tomorrow. In the sense, we are also nurturing another, generation when we talk about ourselves. And often, when there's so much of talk on gender parity and trying to focus on women health, but it's still not an equal world. And we really need to take care of ourselves because I think women, we always put ourselves on the back seat. You ask any married woman, you ask any mother, she's always looking at, whether husband is getting his tiffin to go to work or the child is, getting their food. But when it comes to taking care of her health, it's always on the back seat. And honestly, when women come to me as clients, I'm always worried, because I don't think she will really be able to do it. But if a husband comes to me as a client, I automatically see that the woman will not only lose weight, but also achieve her goals, even though she's not consulting me, because she will not want to cook separately for herself. So this is what it is, and I'm sure it's going to get better because even men, they are really becoming more and more supportive, and I think the families have understood the importance of women. And I'm going to talk to you from my personal experience consulting for the last 22 years because I predominantly work a lot with children, especially children with childhood obesity, diabetes, type 1, type 2, as well as women, especially with gestational diabetes. So, ma'am has asked me to speak on who is a vulnerable population. And I think we all know that, not that everybody, but yes, I think in today's talk, I'm only going to focus on more on children as well as women. And I think nutrition pays a very special attention at every phase of life. You look at the life cycle right from birth to the woman being, an adolescent, to a woman being pregnant, to the later years of life, and then post-menopause. I think each stage of life becomes extremely important, and nutrition is definitely one of the key drivers when it comes to ensuring that the woman has a good life, not only, in the early years, but also post, when she's in the, in the later years of life. Now, I'm sure you'll have heard about this, first 1,000 days. Honestly, in the past, we really never used to get women coming to us that saying that, okay, we're planning to conceive. Can you help us correct our nutrition? But today we have more and more people coming to say that, okay, I'm planning to conceive in the next 6 months or the next 3 months. Can you help me with my nutrition? They're so concerned about wanting to be, in their ideal body weight category because they know that the nutrition plays a very, very important role. And it's not only about 1,000 days. We all know what is 1,000 days, right? So it's about from conception till the baby is 2 years of age. That's the most crucial period in which what is the maternal nutrition as well as the child nutrition plays a very, very important role in the future of the offspring. So that is extremely important. But we also know that taking care of yourself, even in the years before conception, becomes important because today's women are conceiving pretty late. If you ask your grandmother at what age she conceived, it would have been 16 and 18. And that's why you see there's hardly any difference between the mother and the grandmother. They look more or less like sisters. But today, if you see, I think the biological clock and the career clock are often conflicting with each other. And that's why women, plan their babies later. So now we have women coming to us planning, conception after the age of 30, 35, sometimes even 40. And this is predominantly, again, a stage where there is a risk of definitely she's a little more, on the overweight side most often because of our kind of lifestyle, and also her risk for gestational diabetes and all other complications also goes up. And therefore, nutrition plays a very, very important role. And I think every woman should consult a qualified nutritionist to get her diet right, especially in the 1,000 days of life. Now, we all have heard about the Barker's hypothesis. How many of you all have heard about it? Okay, now this is very, very important and very interesting because fetal programming happens in the womb. So what the mother eats or the maternal nutrition will actually reflect in what this child is going to be in the future. So if if this child grows up to be an adult who's obese or having comorbid conditions such as diabetes, hypertension, dyslipidemia, etc., it could be that the mother is not adequately nourished when she was pregnant. So the whole fetal programming, and this is so, so important, and that's why the whole focus on the 1,000 days of life, because this will not only impact the health of the mother, but also of the offspring and in the later years of life of this. And what is really, really interesting, so this is what it is. So low nutrient intrauterine environment, anticipation of limited resources, and that's why you see a lot of, I'll tell you my own grandparents' story. So they were not very well-to-do, and they had 4 children. In fact, one egg used to be cut into 4 pieces, and 4 children used to eat. So this was the life. And then early years, in the late 30s, early 40s, they all developed diabetes. In fact, 3 of them succumbed to heart disease. And now when I look at this, I can relate it back then. So this is so, so important about nutrition. Maternal nutrition is extremely important. And what is even more interesting is that if the woman is pregnant, and if she's got a girl child, if she's pregnant with a girl child, it will also impact the grandchild, because the eggs of the girl child are formed in the womb when she's, in the womb of the mother. And I think this is so, so interesting. Okay, so we are really, really important people, and we have to take care of ourselves first. And therefore, nurturing a healthy pregnancy and lactation becomes extremely important. Again, this is another thing. I think when people get pregnant, or even before that, they're very, very careful. Everybody wants to fit into that LBD. You all know what is LBD? Little black dress. Okay, so we want to be very fit, and we go on to these kind of fad diets and, doing the keto diet, and you have so many diets. I think every day there can be one diet that you can embark on. And when they get pregnant, they say, okay, now I can wear those loose dresses and nobody's going to tell me anything. So it is time now to eat for 2. And they have the mother and the mother-in-law, both of them, saying that wo 15 kilo ka ghee ka dabba khatam karna hai, you have to eat so much because they're so worried about that baby. Don't we hear these stories? Okay, you're fed that you have to have that milk with kesar so that the skin color of the baby is fair. You have to have that apple, and so many times in my consultation, I have the woman coming either with her mother or mother-in-law because there's so many fads and myths around, pregnancy. And, so they think they can eat for 2, but honestly, in today's times, we really don't want them to eat for 2 because we're really monitoring the weight gain in pregnancy. Because we definitely are seeing a very high incidence of gestational diabetes, preeclampsia, eclampsia in pregnancy. So this is something that we really have to be careful about. And the guidelines are very clear, which I'm going to state to you. So yes, where, in the past, people used to gain 22. In fact, we have some celebrities who gain 25 kilos in pregnancy. So they are our role models. But honestly, no, we are very, very careful. And I think even the doctors are very careful. And they keep telling the woman that you cannot gain so much weight. So the first trimester, not really, you don't need to gain weight. It's only in the second and the third trimester that weight gain should happen. But again, it should be in the range that is provided here. Again, weight loss. We have a lot of people who are very careful. That's another section also we have, that even when they're pregnant, they're careful because they don't want to gain weight post-delivery. They want to be still slim. Now, that is also a concern. In fact, we've had a recent woman who has done the same thing, not really eaten too much because she's very scared of eating, and then not really gained weight. There's been no maternal weight gain, and today, the baby is also not growing adequately. So this is another concern. So definitely not aiming at weight loss in pregnancy. This is the first thing. Second thing is weight gain. As I said, it's in the second and the third trimester. So first trimester, we really don't give additional calories, nor do we expect any weight gain. Okay, but again, in the first trimester, there are other challenges. I think the mothers here will relate to it. Okay, there is so much of nausea and there is morning sickness and you can't really, retain anything. And there's a lot of weight loss also that happens. I mean, there is a little bit of weight loss that could happen in the first trimester. And achieve close to, I think this is very important. We always tell any woman who's consulting us for nutrition or for weight loss that, try and achieve at least closer to ideal body weight. Maybe you can't achieve ideal body weight, but at least closer so that, that during pregnancy, then at least calories are a fitter mother, and then there are better pregnancy outcomes. So I think this is so, so important. And today, while I'm addressing a group of women, I'm sure even if one of you can give this message to maybe 2 or 3 more women, I think we would have done a great job. So this is so important. Now, when we come about, when it comes to nutrition in pregnancy, it becomes so important. And let me tell you, a woman will do anything because she wants the baby to be healthy. Okay, and there the focus even of the family is on the woman. I think that's the only time where everybody's focusing on the woman. It's for that baby. Okay, so we should enjoy and bask in that, whatever attention that we get. And there's an interplay of nutrients. There's so many nutrients. I've just listed a few of them, which become very, very important. And we know folic acid's role is even before the conception. So this is so important. Half the time people don't even know that they're pregnant. Okay, so that is where you've lost the thing. So it's very important to talk about prenatal nutrition, and each nutrient becomes very important. But when I was talking about not really looking at weight loss, even calories, even if it's an overweight woman who's pregnant, we should not give her less than 1600 to 1800 kilocalories because there could be a risk of nutritional ketosis. So even in an overweight, woman, the ADA very clearly states do not go below 1600 to 1800 kilocalories. And that is why consulting a qualified dietitian becomes very important, is because we can look at the calories, but what is very important is to look at quality of calories. So whatever we're giving, because today, we've all heard, and in the COVID times, I think quality of calories has been a huge, huge concern. And today, with eating out, ordering in, and the kind of dietary recalls that we get, the quality of calories have really gone down. So nutrient density, diet diversity, nutrient adequacy, and, the quality of all our nutrients becomes very, very crucial. Now, trimester-wise nutrition, again, as I said, we really don't need to eat for 2. Okay, so energy as per the NIN ICMR 2020 guidelines plus 350 calories. Protein is definitely a nutrient of concern in our country. And let me tell you, even if I'm looking at a non-vegetarian, I know there was a debate about vegetarian, non-vegetarian, but we have different kinds of even non-vegetarians in our country. They would say they're non-vegetarian and they'll eat non-veg once a month. Or they would eat non-veg for a few days in a week, So then you can't really, it's not that you, as a vegetarian, you can't meet your protein. But we have a lot of people now who choose the vegan way of life, And there are so many myths that broccoli has got a lot of protein. You must be seeing on social media. Yes, exactly. So, spinach has got protein, and they're trying to prove you this, and you know the truth, it's not that. So it's very important, again, to be educated as to which are the good protein sources. And while we're looking at protein, is also about giving good quality protein. Because if you look at our plant-based diets, yes, the quality of protein is a concern. But when you do protein complementation, you are able to achieve good quality protein. Carbs, again, we have a lot of mothers who want to continue. They're on intermittent fasting. They say, okay, now I'm pregnant. Can I continue intermittent fasting? Definitely not. Because we do not want them to go into nutritional ketosis. Second is keto diet. I think that's very popular today, and it's all celebrity endorsed. You go on social media, Instagram, everybody's promoting it, but definitely not when the woman is pregnant. They're scared of carbs. Suddenly, in a few decades back, I'm sure, the seniors here will agree with me that everybody was scared of fat. Fat was a villain. Now we have come to a term where carbs are a villain. Carbs are like, oh, nahi, touch me not kind of a thing. So that is how carbs have become. And very clearly in pregnancy, we say this is not what I'm saying, this is what the guidelines, NIN, ICMR guidelines very clearly state, not below 175 grams of carbs per day, because it's very, very important for fetal brain development and functioning. So I have a lot of women who actually debate with me, saying that, no, I can't eat so much carbs. And then I have to show them this, and then they believe it, and then they go by it. So very important is always to talk evidence-based. Evidence-based is very important, and I think that's the difference between a quack and a qualified dietitian or a qualified professional. Okay, we definitely have to look at fiber, because constipation is another, problem that pregnant women face. Fats, again, while we said fats were a villain, today we say yes, fats can be given. In fact, if you want to meet the calories, you want to keep the carbs low, you have to give fats and good fats, especially MUFA fats, EPA, DHA, all these are very, very important, especially in pregnancy. All your micronutrients, which you all specified. Anemia, okay, because of hemodilation is also there, but again, we have to address it, try and educate them about the foods. I have a slide on anemia. Gestational diabetes, yes, I'm definitely seeing a very high incidence of gestational diabetes. One could also be our ethnicity, but also it could be that women are now conceiving later. And by that, when they conceive, they're already overweight, they have insulin resistance, they could be having, hyperinsulinemia or pre-diabetes, which is not detected because half our population does not even check their sugars. We are all in that feel-good factor. Nothing can happen to me, I'm still young. But today the government and a lot of medical associations are also pushing people to start doing their test by the age of 35, I would say 25. Because honestly, we've done a very large study where we screened children and young adolescents and adults in the age group of 16 to 25. And we found that 1/3 of this population had insulin resistance and hyperinsulinemia, were pre-diabetic. So yes, we are sitting on a ticking bomb, and COVID has not really made life simple. It's only become more and more complicated. So we have to really take care. So gestational diabetes, the good news is a lot of them can be controlled by diet alone. So one is you need to test on time, and today doctors are really taking care to screen on time. Also, where we say eat a hearty breakfast. So people eat lots and lots at breakfast, okay? So we'll see 2 cups of poha, 2 cups of sabudana khichdi, just because somebody says sabudana is very good and we go all out and eat sabudana, or, the dosa and the idli. Our breakfast is very carb-rich. Do you agree? Okay, so there's this saying, eat breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince, and dinner like a pauper. I would say eat all meals like a pauper because this king is becoming very fat or the queen is becoming very obese and insulin resistant. So in gestational diabetes, the most important thing is breakfast has to be very light. It has to be low carb, it has to be low GI, low GL, and you have to split the breakfast because there's a lot of insulin resistance in the morning. So we tell them to eat breakfast broken into 2 parts, 2 hours apart. So at 8 o'clock and then at 10 o'clock, so that there's no spike. And in gestational diabetes, we actually check 1 hour post-meal. So where everywhere else we're checking 2 hours post-meal, for gestational diabetes, we check 1 hour post-meal. So 1 hour post-meal should be less than 140 milligram per DL, and 2 hours post-meal should be 120 and below. So the targets are very tight in pregnancy, 90 milligram per DL and below at fasting. So the targets are very tight because you are, otherwise it will lead to complications in the pregnancy and in the offspring. So very, very important is to keep that in mind. Yes, pregnancy induced hypertension, so definitely monitoring blood pressure, blood sugar, everything becomes very, very important. IUGR, which is intrauterine growth retardation, and also low amniotic fluid. These are some of the complications that we are seeing in pregnancy and needs to be dealt with by a qualified professional. And this is something that, when you're in touch with the individual, that's why we call them for trimester-wise follow-ups. It's very important. So one is they come before conception, then the first trimester, the second and the third, because every trimester, the nutrition goals will be different. And they definitely need to start consuming what is their nutritional requirement for that trimester. So very important is to sensitize them. Lactation, I think again this is very important because once the baby is out, the mothers, they feel they can eat anything they want, or some of them are just so worried about them putting on weight that they don't really eat adequate. So lactation, again, the calorie requirements, if you see, are high. Again, quality of calories matter. We always tell them, especially if they've had gestational diabetes in pregnancy, we definitely tell them to monitor, and we call them for a follow-up. Because what happens is if you have gestational diabetes in pregnancy, your chances, that's your window. Or that is like actually telling you that you are at a higher risk of diabetes in the future. So if you have gestational diabetes, your chances of developing diabetes type 2 in the future is very high. So this woman definitely needs to be followed up and needs to be monitored on a regular basis. So we don't leave her just post-delivery, because till delivery she's very good, she's very compliant. Once the baby is out, then she's, trying and finishing all those methi ka laddus and the ding ka laddus and the ghee and all the extra calories, piling on the pounds, and then getting more insulin resistance and then diabetic in the near future. So this is something which is very important. But what I want to highlight is nutrition plays a very, very important role even in lactation. And we all know that the focus is on breastfeeding today because that itself will expend a lot of calories. And in fact, women, we have to tell them don't, because they want to start going to the gym in the next 20, 30 days. They want to start working out. Yes, it's not bad, but then go slow. Even in terms of, reducing the calories, you don't have to lose weight overnight or, in the next 20 days. Gradually, and the more you breastfeed, the better it is. The bond between the mother and the baby is better. The nutrition to the child is also good, as well as you will definitely lose weight because breastfeeding itself is a caloric expending activity. Now, we are facing a dual burden of malnutrition, and the NFHS 5 report is just out, and honestly, there's so much of awareness on malnutrition. But let me tell you that even if you're having, we're having malnutrition and malnutrition. Okay, so malnutrition is, yes, they're getting inadequate calories because of whatever resources, if they're coming from low resource settings, etc. But we have a lot of our kids, in fact, a lot of, children come to my own clinic, and when we look at their dietary recalls, from morning to night, they're only eating out of packets. And today, if the food is not tasty, Swiggy, Zomato, Zindabad. And you have that no contact delivery. So we have kids who are so addicted to eating out that they actually tell the watchman at the gate, ki please andar mat bhejna. They go to the gate, they will eat, and then they come home. So there's so much of addiction to eating out. And again, what is the quality of calories? So even in these obese kids, we're definitely seeing hidden hunger, we're seeing malnutrition. And this is our biggest concern. And let me tell you honestly, the youngest child that I have with type 2 diabetes in my clinic is 6 years old. So 6, 10, 12. Today, in fact, in the past when children used to be referred to my clinic, I used to, be very positive it's a type 1. It's a child with type 1 diabetes. But today I actually look at the prescription because so many of them are misdiagnosed as type 1, but are actually type 2. Childhood obesity is on the rise. I recently consulted a child from Muscat, and I was surprised. 11-year-old, 82 kilos. She was 38 kilos pre-pandemic. Father lost his job. Mother started giving tuitions, 3 children. So mother was teaching from morning to evening because obviously she has to earn the money. And father is very fond of eating, so ordering in, and you know how it is in the Middle East. Somebody is from the Middle East, somebody just was presenting. And you know the kind of food, it's your shawarmas and the samosas and the chips and everything. And this girl has gained so much weight that now she's embarrassed to go back to school. Because she's worried what her friends are going to make fun of her. She's got those kind of issues. And we are seeing this day, and I'm telling you, 95 kilos, 100 kilos kids, 11, 12, 15-year-olds. And it's something that we're really worried about because they are already insulin resistant. If you look at their neck, there's acanthuses, and these are kids who are going to get diabetes very early on in life. Honestly, when I started my practice 22 years back, we used to see only people after the age of 60, 65. I'm sure even you all grandmothers, grandfathers at a very later age getting diabetes. Today, we're having very young people with diabetes. And this is predominantly because our food, our lifestyle, physical activity. I would really put the whole focus because physical activity has really gone down, and in the pandemic it's even become worse. Our kids obviously couldn't go down to play, so it was gadgets, so they're exercising their fingers more. There's no physical activity at all, and today it's becoming a big challenge to get them to exercise. So that is another big concern, but yes, childhood obesity is on the rise, and we are definitely seeing complications arising because of childhood obesity. So very important is to focus on, eating right and definitely moving more. I think exercise, physical activity needs to be focused on. So this is just the statistics from NFHS 5, and like you see, yes, the numbers are, in some states there's an improvement, in some states, yes, there's a concern, but yes, overweight, childhood obesity, we are second to China in the number of obese children in the world. Okay, and here, though we're talking about malnutrition, even in these obese children, there is malnutrition, there is hidden hunger. So we have to look at the quality of nutrients they're consuming because parents are working. And even, it's not an easy, even work from home wasn't easy for most mothers. It is really challenging. And then trying to, cook food, and children want so much of variety. So often what happens is eating out, and a lot of food that is from outside is not really healthy. Even if you look at your biscuit packets, even if they say oats biscuit, if you really read the food label, see how much oats is there, 6 to 12% of oats. Everything else is maida, and I finished the entire packet because it's oats biscuit. So the moment I think it's diet, I would eat the entire packet sitting in front of the television. And today, somebody was talking about screen time. It's gone up considerably. One is because of online school, and secondly is after that, it's me time. So then, children want their me time, all of you, right? And when we ask children, what time do you sleep? 2 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, waking up at any time. And this is really, really a big concern. Yes, we are looking at, monitoring. And then when it comes to the baby, yes, we are looking at monitoring. We do the growth charts. We're definitely monitoring, tracking them for stunting. We're looking at growth velocity, that at every clinic visit, what is the kind of growth. I think this is very important. And we as qualified professionals will always do this when it comes to children. And again, we're looking at nutrients, so providing adequate calories. We're looking at protein, for sure, zinc, calcium, iron, iodine. But very important is to rule out celiac disease. Okay, because celiac disease or even hypothyroidism, if it's undiagnosed, a lot of times it's undiagnosed. You wouldn't even think, why it's happening. And then if you do the test, you realize, oh, this child has got celiac disease. We're also seeing an increasing incidence of celiac disease in our country. First, it was only the northern part of India where we saw celiac. But today, because of the migration, maybe because of work, etc., we're definitely seeing this. And we are doing celiac testing for all our children with type 1 diabetes. So every child who's diagnosed with type 1, we know that hypothyroidism, celiac, and type 1 diabetes, it's a very common thing. So that is why we always test them for it. Okay, SAM and MAM, we all know about it, and therefore today you have RUTF, which is there, and it's really done a world of a difference. I actually heard the presentation of the people who make it. It was outstanding. So that is something. Anemia. Again, we are seeing a very high incidence. In fact, even when we did our study, which I told you about, 57% of the women, of the girls, adolescent and young girls, were anemic. So this is definitely a concern. We really have, we could rule out many, many factors. Everybody thinks of just iron deficiency anemia. It could be folic acid. We know B12 deficiency, protein deficiency, worm infestations, nutrient-nutrient interaction. A lot of people take iron and calcium together. Or they take iron and they'll have chai. We need our chai immediately after food. And this is only what we give people with thalassemia. Honestly, I give them tea after food because I want the iron not to be absorbed. But otherwise, areca nut, especially in the low socioeconomic settings. This is another thing. You can actually go and look up. There's a lot of papers on this. Betel nut and areca nut, causing, in fact, a friend of mine did this study, and she was surprised that young children with anemia, the consumption of areca nut and betel nut, especially in the low socioeconomic setting, is very high. So that could also be the reason. So it's not, it couldn't be just nutritional. There could be a lot of other things also that we're looking at. Celiac disease. In fact, recently we had a child referred to us. Hemoglobin was 4. Can you imagine how low? And then when the doctor did the diagnosis, it was actually undiagnosed celiac. The moment we put the child on a GFD, which is gluten-free diet, automatically the anemia corrected, the hemoglobin came up. And this is something which is so important. That's the right clinical diagnosis, and therefore we have to work as a team. I think the whole multidisciplinary approach becomes very, very critical. So even if it's a nutritionist, I know a lot of people here are nutritionists, but it's very important to work as a team and look at these things, because we only look at it as iron deficiency or maybe B12 deficiency. It could be celiac. So even if you try correcting the iron, it's not going to help. So this is something which is very important. Talk about drug-nutrient interactions. Talk about nutrient-nutrient interactions. Because they don't realize, sometimes they're eating food which has got iron and calcium, and that itself, the absorption is going to be hindered, excessive or prolonged. We have a girl right now who's having her periods for 15 to 20 days a month, and it's crazy. Okay, pregnancy, hemodilution, kidney disease, etc. I was told I have 45 minutes, right? Okay. So I'm not done yet. Okay. I'll try, but I have made my presentation for 45 minutes. I think we started late. Okay, so this is a girl child who was referred to us, female, 16-year-old, 96 kilos. Can you imagine? Okay, working parents, nuclear family, again, staying with the maid, doesn't listen, just orders in food, packaged foods, dinner, if the food is not tasty, ordering in, and physical activity was nil. And if you look at her neck, you can see acanthosis. So I always, I've got this bad habit of looking at people's neck. Even if I'm in a lift or an elevator, I'll first look at the neck. And I'm itching to tell that person, please get your insulin test done. But yes, this is something which is very important, because if you do the serum insulin levels, you can actually catch hyperinsulinemia. Put them on a moderate carb, good protein, low GI, low GL diet, and you can actually bring their insulin levels in range. This is really, really important. And I'm telling you, it's wonderful to see the neck clearing up. From an acanthosis, which is really, really great, very dark neck, pigmented neck, and then suddenly with the weight loss, right diet, physical activity, you'll see it just clears up beautifully. And we actually keep pictures of those, of the neck to just show the child, and that itself motivates. PCOS and low I think PCOS again, and I've got a few slides on PCOS as well. So I think you will all relate to this. I'm not going to read out each of this, but this is something that we are seeing increasingly, especially with a lot of young children today. Diabesogenic environment. Today we are all slaves to our phones. We wake up in the morning, it's our phone, and then in the night, I always tell people, don't wake up and look at your phone, because 1 hour goes only in answering good morning messages. You could have done some physical activity then. So this is so important, and I think very important is to be good role models if we are parents. I think, our children will follow our footsteps and not our advice. So this is so, so important. And yes, the pandemic has really not done good. In fact, if you see, there was a very interesting survey that was done, which showed that the maximum ingredient that was sold during the pandemic was the baking ingredients. And I think everybody baked banana bread or some kind of bread. In fact, even I learned baking during the pandemic. And, so the mothers donned their chef caps and everybody was cooking, and children definitely. So, somebody was asking first wave. I think first wave, everybody lost weight because there were no maids. So the bigger the house, the slimmer you were. In fact, a lot of people realized why it was so important to have smaller houses. Because, the people with 2 and 3 bedrooms really had a tough time. And we saw a lot of weight loss initially. And then when food started becoming available, everybody started gaining weight. And yes, weight gain has happened, affected the children really. So again, this is another thing that I'm just taking you through what I see in my clinic, okay? Precocious puberty. We are seeing girls in the age of 6 and 8 today, having precocious puberty, and this is another big concern. And today we're talking about endocrine disruptors, xenoestrogens, we're talking about doing away with all the plastic and all the xenoestrogens, and you can really look this up because this is so, so important to educate our young children. Again, eating out of packets as much as possible, physical activity, because we're definitely seeing this is another big concern, especially in our girl children. PCOS. A lot of times PCOS could also be misdiagnosed, so very important is to get a correct diagnosis by going to a correct gynecologist, getting an endocrine checkup, and then coming with a confirmed diagnosis. No, usually it is like, okay, I've got PCOS, yours also symptoms looks like PCOS, so label PCOS. Not really. A lot of times it could be misdiagnosed, but yes, nutrition plays a very, very important role. So while we're talking about moderating carbs, we have to look at carbs. We have to moderate the carbs. Look at the quality of carbs. Look at consuming low GI, low GL carbs, reduce the calories if they are excess, reduce processed foods, focus on fiber. I've just written it down, lentil carbs. And therefore, pulses really do well. Because they are low GI, low GL, and they give you good satiety. They've got good lentil carbs, good fiber, and also protein. So yes, we use a lot of this in our plans, as well as your barley, oats, etc. Because they've got beta-glucan, which is really good, not only to lower cholesterol, helps in PCOS, also very good for diabetes. Definitely increase the protein. Protein is a huge challenge, especially with our young population. I think it's with everybody. So the focus has to be protein, and let me tell you, we really don't need to invest on protein supplements. Because the moment we think of protein, it's like, oh, should I start taking whey? First day in the gym, and I start on whey. Or, and then second day, I'm not doing anything. So very important is you really don't need to get there. Healthy fats. So yes, we are looking at increasing the fat, the good fats, especially your MUFA, omega-3 fats. And therefore, not really going very low carb, not like the ketogenic diet where we're looking at 20 or 50 grams of carbs. I think that's not sustainable. Honestly, it is not sustainable. I always say do something which has no expiry date because we have to do it forever. Otherwise, you're constantly having yo-yos, that you see those ads, Slimming Center ads, before, after. You don't know what is really after because nobody shows you that. So that is why do whatever is sustainable, very important. Focus on green leafy vegetables. Another thing that I want to highlight here is uric acid. A lot of times people have hyperuricemia. The first thing that the doctor will tell is stop protein. So the person will stop protein and continue with his beer, whiskey, alcohol, and now alcohol also 3 days a week. So we have a mid-weekend, pandemic, even that happened. Mid-weekend and then the weekend, right? So then 3-4 days a week was alcohol. So I have my alcohol. I don't drink water because I don't remember to drink water. And I continue having my fruit juices and all the things, cereals, breakfast cereals, and actually that's the culprit. So look at high fructose corn syrup. That's the biggest culprit. Alcohol. Dehydration, all these things are reasons for hyperuricemia, and it's a part of your metabolic syndrome. So really stopping protein will not help. It will only worsen the condition. Yes, so we have to move with the times, and there is a lot of evidence to show today that yes, hyperuricemia is also because of all this. So look at high fructose corn syrup, all your breakfast cereal packets. The advertisements seem very tempting. A lot of people start eating that. If you look at the ingredients, there is HFCS, which is rapidly absorbed. So all your triglycerides, uric acid is because of that. So yes, we have to look at that. All your fruit juices, even though how real they look, they're not really advisable. Okay, anti-inflammatory diet. Somebody said eat 4 fruits a day. I think it's really expensive. Even nimbu ka bhav has become more now. When I tell people to have nimbu, they say, Madam, 12 rupya nimbu. Okay, so we have to look at the cost as well. But yes, even 2 fruits a day, whatever is affordable, is good. At least vegetables, because vegetable is another. Children. I have parents who tell me my child eats bhindi 365 days a year. Okay, and I'm sure some of you also. I've had one girl who went abroad to study and the mother arranged for bhindi even in the university there in the US. That is like going really, really high, but trying including vegetables, more seasonal fruits and vegetables, eat a rainbow. Omega-3 fats, yes, very important at all stages of life. Gut health. I think today the more the focus is gut health. We really need to look at good gut health. And our foods, even some of our traditional foods. When I tell an East Indian, I don't know how many of you are from eastern part of India. I'm sure one is. I could make out that. So when I tell them to have panta bhat and pakala, they're so happy. They say, oh yeah, can I have it? I say yes, because that's the best source of your, your B12, your probiotics, etc. So this is something that you have to focus on. A lot of our Indian foods, traditional foods, can give you good gut health. You have raw banana flour. I don't know how many of you are from South India, but today the focus is on raw jackfruit flour, raw banana flour. In fact, jackfruit flour, you must have seen Man Ki Baat. Okay, I know the person who is actually doing it. It works wonderfully in diabetes, very good for gut health. In fact, if somebody has constipation, it really works well. If you just mix it with curd and take pre-meals, it works beautifully. Vitamin D, yes. But again, I see people just taking vitamin D. Weakness ho raha hai, so I start vitamin D. But we know that hypervitaminosis also can happen, and it's not good because that can increase the calcium resorption from the bones and lead to heart disease. So very important is when we're looking at vitamin D, look at calcium, look at magnesium. Very, very important, which nobody does. Vitamin D, even if we ask people, when have you taken it? Doctor ne diya tha, 1 saal pehle, abhi bhi le rahe hum log. So this is another big thing because it's, we have a lot of well-wishers and friends who are, so self-proclaimed. Another thing is advanced glycation end products. Yeah, 5 minutes. I'll be done. Okay, 5 minutes.
They are asking the students to come on.
Oh, okay. Okay, I think I'll have to end. So just advanced glycation end products and chrononutrition. I think eating on time. I'm just going to take you through. I think I won't be able to finish. Yeah? Yeah. Okay. So some other day maybe, because I had prepared my slides for 45 minutes. So anyways, it was lovely talking to you. And I think we've come to the end of it. So maybe some other time we can definitely discuss. Okay. So thank you so much. I hope you all enjoyed the presentation.